you. Thank you, Stacy, for that really interesting presentation. Our next speaker is Tracy. Tracy Walraven is the unit manager for the DC Department of Forensic Sciences in the Digital Evidence section. She will be presenting to us a talk regarding accrediting a digital evidence laboratory. So, Tracy.
All right. Okay, good. Mic work? Awesome. Great. Again, I'm Tracy Walraven. I'm the Digital Evidence Unit Manager with the DC Department of Forensic Sciences, or DFS, as we're known. And I know you see the title of this presentation and you're like, hey, I'm gonna leave here and I'm gonna know everything there's to know about accrediting a digital evidence lab. Not so much. I've got about 20 minutes. So what I can do is share with you our lab story, and in hopes that you get some insights and maybe you can take some of this back with you. So, once upon a time, or in a galaxy far, far away if you prefer, there was a tiny digital evidence unit that was struggling for its survival in the DFS galaxy. I like Star Wars, y'all can figure that out. Yes. And I think in July of 2016, it was attacked by a red-headed monster that was intent on its success and survival. When I first got to DFS, what I found was state-of-the-art equipment, a beautiful facility, but it was all collecting dust in our digital evidence unit. I also found very competent, smart, bright, capable staff that really didn't have the confidence to be able to complete an exam. And that's kind of frightening, actually. So, as we would say at DFS, I wasn't receiving that. So what we do from there is figure out who we were and what services we provided. So one of the things I did was consulted with our stakeholders, because we serve about 40 different agencies within the DC area. And I said, hey, what do you guys need from us? What do you want us to do? How can we serve you? How can we make you guys, the best law enforcement or whatever agencies that we can help you with? And they came back and said, hey, we need you to do this, 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 and this, and this. So that helped us define our services, define who we are. The first part of accreditation is understanding what you do, because you do have to have a scope and a couple of sub-disciplines within there. And so that's helped us out, and we were thrilled with the casework. But, as always, be careful what you wish for, because that was about fall 2016. So about mid-2017, we hadn't doubled our casework, we hadn't tripled our casework. We'd actually grown in casework by well over 1,000%, which is crazy. But it was starting to take notice. People were starting to look and go, hey, this is a lab that's awesome. And in addition to that, we managed to maintain no backlog and also do a 5-day turnaround time, which in the digital evidence world is kind of unheard of. So people were starting to bring us stuff, and we were loving it. But what goes along with that, of course, is the fact that you're going to have real digital evidence laboratory problems. You're going to encounter DME myths, like digital evidence can't be accredited. And, oh my God, how do I balance casework with accreditation? And that wouldn't be so bad, except for the fact that we have this nice little DC statute that helped create us that mandates that all forensic services within the Forensic Science Laboratory, which is where we fall in DFS, must be accredited. And so, me being me, took a giant step back and go, crap, what do we do now? I'm also one of those people that can't pack a suitcase without a packing list and packing cubes to put stuff in, and it's really insane. So I needed a plan, because that's how I work. So we came up with a plan. And this is based on a FSWGDE document, which offers guidance for accreditation. So if you're interested, I've got the link that's part of this slide as well. And we started with, where are we at? What do we have? What do we have that we can work with, and what do we have that we can build on? Well, the first thing is, we were already part of a quality system. We were one of 2 units that were not accredited within the FSL. So great, we'll fit into a 17025 framework. Awesome, great, box checked. We don't have to worry about that. The second thing we had going for us was the fact we already had a vendor. We already had A&AB as our vendor, And there's no reason why we would choose a separate vendor. That made no sense. So I was like, awesome, box checked. We got 2 things. Well, then we had to look at what we didn't have, and we had nothing. Blatantly, we had no SOPs. We were doing high quality work, and people were very pleased with the results that we were giving them. And we were employing best practices and digital evidence. It was awesome, but we really didn't have any of the documentation for accreditation. So we decided to fill those gaps and create those. The first thing we started with was our SOPs, and one of the tips I have on here is we just wrote down what we did. We were already following best practices and started, instead of trying to reinvent something or make something new, we just literally put on paper what we were doing, and that worked. Another little tip on here is some of the guidance that I was receiving while I was doing this was name specific tools. I wasn't comfortable with that. Our tools do change because technology changes. So in terms of filling the gaps, we started with our SOPs, writing down what we did. Then we started with a training manual because we had to train into what we were doing, which makes sense. And then the rest of the quality documentation fell into place. So we began our quality process, I'd say late fall of 2017, and by spring of 2018, we were ready for our first pre-assessment, which was awesome. I was like, okay, this is great. We've survived. People are gonna come in, they're gonna see how great we are, obviously. And we're gonna be this nice little accredited lab. So one thing I've learned about the assessors that we encountered is we do have some of the most cutting edge technology in our laboratory, which we're very proud of, and we're happy to share that. However, some of our assessors were not necessarily up on this technology, which provided a problem. There was a lot of explaining, so I would say if you're looking to accredit your digital evidence laboratory, make sure your assessors are aware of what you're doing and they understand it. But our pre-assessment went great. It went awesome. We had a bunch of conforming with comments. I think we had one that little thing we had to change. Then we did our final assessment. And we had about 3 things we had to change off of that. Not a big deal, little things, nothing that affect our policies or our processes or anything like that. So, as my boss who's in this audience can attest to, I don't back down from a fight, which is definitely not what you want in your employee all the time. Sometimes yes, not all the time. And I wanted to appeal 2 of the findings that we had, because I was like, hey, we are following the standard. There's a preference for how the assessor would like it, and then there's the standard. So we appealed, won 1, lost 1. That's okay. We made minor adjustments, and within a couple of months, we were actually accredited. We were an accredited digital evidence laboratory, and we fit within our FSL, which was also part of the DC statute. So everybody was happy, including me, believe it or not. This entire process for us didn't take that long. I've heard horror stories about laboratories, taking years to get accredited. For us, we started it, really getting serious about it, fall of 2017. By fall of 2018, we were accredited. So I was very, very excited. So my next slide these are questions that I get. In addition to that, there's a myth that I actually encountered at DFS that I had to explain. And one of the reasons the myth is essentially, hey, digital evidence can only be accredited under 17020, not 025. I said, not from what I understand. My peers in this field are 17025, so I'm not understanding where this is coming from. But this nice little chart I have for you, this is a place to start if you're wanting to know what's best for your laboratory. So for us, obviously we already had a quality management system under 17025, so that just made sense. Another thing that we had was we have scientists working in a laboratory, so most of our work is actually done in the laboratory, it's not done in the field. So again, things that made sense for us. So continuing under the 17025 umbrella. However, what if you have a laboratory where most of your work, so to speak, is actually done outside, or it's done in the field somewhere, or maybe you have detectives or special agents, and they're not necessarily working in a laboratory. Those are things that you need to ask yourself when you're looking at becoming accredited and trying to figure out where you fit into this. So, and finally, digital challenges. So these are things that I encountered as part of our laboratory we were getting accredited. One of them obviously covered the 17020 thing. No, we can be 17025 and still be a digital evidence laboratory, perfectly okay. The next is, well, you can't be accredited at all because you don't fit in with any of this stuff. Okay, it's not a one-to-one match. There are things that are NAs, but you can become accredited. That's obvious. Next, oh, well, there's a special accreditation for you. And I'm not real sure what special accreditation means, but I heard that over and over again, and I asked and, of course, didn't get an explanation. But no, there is no special accreditation. You're filling out the same form as everybody else, and you're doing exactly what every other unit in your laboratory is doing as well. And then finally, oh God, we gotta completely redo how we do everything if we get accredited. No, you don't. You can just write down what you do and stick to it. That's what we did, and it seemed to work. We did make some minor adjustments. If there was a new best practice that came out, we incorporated that. But overall, no. We just did what we said we were doing. All right, where'd my little slide go? Sorry. All right, casework versus accreditation. One of the things in becoming like a real laboratory with a whole bunch of casework, and our casework continues to escalate, which I'm very, very proud of, but it does put some constraints on you in terms of trying to develop your accreditation documentation. One of the things that we're held to is that we have a 5-day turnaround time from receipt of legal authority and device. This is a KPI for us, and we have to hit that 90% of the time. I'm happy to say we're killing it, but that means 90% of the devices that come into my laboratory have to be out of there in 5 days or less. So that's one of the constraints that we're under. Thank you, Mayor Bowser, because that's one of the things that they elected for us to do in order to serve our community better. So then how do you get casework done and write all the documentation? This is a big one. For us, we took one a week, and if we could take 2 a week, we did, and we would just knock it out. Just be like, okay, everybody good with this? All right. And I would assign SOPs written by my analyst who are more comfortable and more familiar with maybe that particular SOP, and they would write it, knock it out of the park, good times. So it can be done. You do have to prioritize it. It is going to be something at first that's like, oh God, but once you get into it, you're good to go. It kind of becomes routine. And this is still how we continue to do that, because we still are adding new SOPs as we increase our services, which is awesome. And then finally, one of the biggest questions I get is, well, what do I do with the sections that don't necessarily apply to DME, like uncertainty of measurement? This is real hard. You write a sentence that says, this is not applicable to the digital evidence unit. That's honestly one of the top questions that I get from my peers. So it's pretty simple. That's it. That's all I've got for you guys. Thank you very much for your attention. I will be around if anybody has any questions, but happy to be here. Done.